exploration.
Recording in progress.
Oh, good. Hi, recording. Yeah, that's a visitation from the Zoom angel. But anyway, yes, we are recruiting teachers for religious exploration in the fall. So there are some lead positions that are actually paid positions, and then there are volunteer positions that you would be there as an assistant. And there's more information in the ACE, and then through the ACE you can talk to Amy Brock, our Director of Religious Exploration. And I also want to thank those who stepped up kind of last minute to complete the Bethlehem Inn dinner last Thursday. There was just really quite a gathering of volunteers for that, so thank you. In addition, I just want to honor Joyce Sale, who in addition to being our kitchen cleanup kind of supervisor, she has taken over the recycle task that Joan Landsberg had so faithfully done for years to keep our ink cartridges out of the landfill, but now we can also translate them into some money for the church to buy office supplies, so we're really happy about that. So lastly, I'm just going to say, if you do have questions about our congregation, you can meet with our Connections team. They meet at the Connections Corner, just inside the gathering hall, and also next Sunday, August 6th, we'll have a newcomer welcome, so you can meet some folks, bring your questions about the congregation, and we're moving in this is the last stretch of summer. So August is pretty quiet, but we're gearing up for a really wonderful year ahead. So blessings on your day.
Now is the time for our offering. These donations support the programs and services UUFCO provides. If this is your first time here, please feel free to pass the basket. Your presence is a gift to us. Good morning. My name is Wendy Howard, and this is the time in our service for expressing our joys and sorrows together. I'm a member of the pastoral care team, and there's more information about our team on the kiosk. We work with our minister, offering support and compassionate listening to members in the congregation. As I share the few joys and sorrows, actually joys that were shared today, I just want to point out that on the edge we have candles that you can light if you have a quiet joy or a sorrow that you would like to honor with some additional light. The first joy is from Chris Herrick. She said, "The rufous hummingbirds have just returned to my feeders. I fear they had been extinguished by climate change." And our second is from Connie Freeman. "My husband Keith has finished 6 months of chemo for pancreatic cancer, and his scan shows that he is cancer-free." Yeah. We're celebrating traveling in our van for the next 2 months. What a joy. As we go forward from here, may all of our joys be celebrated, and may all of our sorrows be tenderly held with kindness and compassion.
Live in the land of plenty. Many things ain't plenty anymore. Like the water from our sink, they say it's not safe to drink. Gotta go and buy it at the store. Now we're told there's a hole in the ozone. Look what's washing up on the beach. And Lord, I believe from the heavens to the seas, we're bringing Mother Nature to her knees. So let's leave some blue up above us. Let's leave some green on the ground. It's only ours to borrow. Let's save some for tomorrow. Leave it and pass it on down. There's a change taking place out on the mountains. Acid rain is falling on the leaves. And down in Brazil, the fires are burning still. How we gonna breathe without them trees? So let's leave some blue up above us. Let's leave some green on the ground. It's only ours to borrow. Let's save some for tomorrow. Leave it and pass it on down. There's a place where I live called the Canyons, where my daddy taught me how to swim. And the water is so pure, and I'm gonna make sure that his grandkids can swim there like him. Now we all ought to feel just a little bit guilty when we look into the eyes of our kids. 'Cause brother, it's a fact, if we take and not put back, they're gonna have to pay for all that we did. So let's leave some blue up above us. Let's leave some green on the ground. It's only ours to borrow. Let's save some for tomorrow. Leave it, pass it on down. So let's leave some blue up above us. Let's leave some green on the ground. It's only ours to borrow. Let's save some for tomorrow. Leave it and pass it on down. Let's leave some blue up above us. Let's leave some green on the ground. It's only ours to borrow. Let's save some for tomorrow. Leave it and pass it on down. Leave it and pass it on down.
Thank you, house band. You are amazing. And Debbie is amazing. She was playing Be Kind to Our Web-Footed Friends. How many of you remember Sing Along with Mitch? Yeah, and the bouncing ball. Yeah. We now begin the time for quiet reflection and meditation. I will read a few words, and then I will ring the bell to lead us into a quiet time. When I ring the bell again, we will come back and prepare for our sermon. My words are from Henry Beston, author of The Outermost House. Animals are not brethren. They are not underlings, but beings gifted with extensions of the senses we have lost or never attained, living by voices we shall never hear. They are other nations caught with us in the net of life and time, fellow prisoners in the splendor and travail of earth. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Sally Compton. Sally has a diverse background working in conservation and the nonprofit sector, both internationally and locally. She holds a degree in evolutionary biology from Cornell University, and her experience includes leading public relations and marketing for the Oregon Coast Aquarium, supporting conservation education at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and contributing to endangered species research in upstate New York, the Philippines, and South Africa. Sally is the executive director of Think Wild and leads operations, community outreach, fundraising, conservation, and key relationship and partnership initiatives for Think Wild. She is the recent recipient of the Ben Chambers Emerging Leader Award and also serves as a board member for the National Wildlife Rehabilitation Association. In her free time, Sally enjoys skiing, mountain biking, and backpacking with her husky. She is grateful to her heroes, Steve Irwin and Jane Goodall, for inspiring her love and passion for wildlife conservation. Please welcome Sally Compton.
Good morning, everyone. I have to say I really empathized with the squirrel book because I was scolded by a squirrel this morning as my husky tried to climb the tree in my front yard after one. But I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to Think Wild volunteer Heather for inviting me to speak in front of you all today. Heather has been a hospital volunteer with Think Wild since the hospital opened back in 2020. So for those of you who might not be familiar with Think Wild, we are a nonprofit wildlife hospital and conservation center here in Bend. We're located over on the corner of Erickson and Neff, and we serve basically all of central and parts of eastern Oregon. Our mission is to inspire the high desert community to care for and protect native wildlife through education, conservation, and rescue and rehabilitation. I think one of the most common questions that I get as the founding director of Think Wild, besides how old are you, is how I got into the field. I've always loved animals. Growing up in Florida, I remember spending my Sunday mornings watching The Crocodile Hunter with my dad, and then we'd go to the nearby golf course ponds and look for the alligators in real life. For my 4th grade class, Dress as Your Hero Day, I showed up in full safari gear with a stuffed monkey as, of course, Jane Goodall. And my first email address was coyotecrazy@aol.com. So it made total sense. One afternoon in high school, my family was driving to a very important work event that they definitely did not want to be late to when I spotted a squirrel on the side of the road. And I swore to my mom that I saw the tail twitch. So there was no choice but for my parents to stop, pick up the poor squirrel, and Google the closest wildlife center, which was, of course, 45 minutes away in the opposite direction. So, lucky squirrel, we turned around and drove there. Thank you, Mom and Dad. We pulled up to East Coast Wildlife Rehab, which was a manufactured home hidden in dense overgrown forest on the side of the road, where we were greeted by 2 full-size emus peeking in our car windows. I later learned that these rescues were from a private owner that realized emus are a little bit more challenging than backyard chickens, which, looking back, I'm like, classic Florida. We brought the squirrel into the woman that owned the property and was operating a full-capacity wildlife center with probably over 100 animals in her care, completely on her own. She needed volunteer help, so call it destiny, my career in wildlife conservation and rescue began. In the couple years that I volunteered there, I picked up orphan baby raccoons off the side of the road. I asked for donations in PetSmart parking lots, wrangled wild pigs, and learned about the many challenges that native wildlife face every day, from car strikes and barbed wire to road construction and windows. I learned about the often unnoticed value that wildlife hospitals bring in being there for the public as a resource when they have wildlife questions or they find injured or orphaned wildlife with nowhere else to go. And this happens a lot more often than you'd think. Actually, about 2,500 times a year, but I'll get back to that. Years passed, and as I continued to pursue a career in wildlife conservation, I often thought of my time at East Coast Wildlife Rehab and the challenges that we faced in trying to provide care for as many animals that needed help, but always struggling to find funding. As I went through college and my career in paths that involved traveling around the world to conduct research, work in corporate sustainability, and do marketing for zoos and aquariums, whenever people asked what my dream job was, it was always the same: to open and run a wildlife hospital. So imagine my surprise when I was scrolling through the job boards one day and I saw that there was a job post from a small group of people in Bend that were looking for someone to start a wildlife hospital here. At this time, I was living in Newport, Oregon, working at the Oregon Coast Aquarium. I literally couldn't believe it. A job posting for my dream job in my dream city. I knew that I had to do everything to get this job, even if at the time I thought I was severely underqualified. And maybe this determination shined through in my cover letter, but somehow I got an interview, and here we are. On my first day, almost 5 years ago, I arrived at 62410 Erickson Road to an empty building. There was no water access, no animal enclosures, no staff, just 4 acres of overgrown cheatgrass. Achieving or even working toward the dream of a fully operating wildlife center seemed light years away. But that was before I knew how incredible, supportive, and engaged the community of Bend is. In just a couple years, we built a team and launched a facility that has quickly grown to become a full-capacity wildlife hospital, an education center, rescuing 1,000 animals and answering 2,500 calls a year. With 16 staff on our team now, including a veterinarian and more than 200 volunteers, we lead youth summer camps, we plant beaver habitat, host wildlife trivia nights, and we even had our recent documentary featured at the Bend Film Festival. Think Wild's quick growth and impact has only further illustrated what we all know to be true. The community of Central Oregon, both human and wildlife, are truly one of a kind. We care about the natural places and living beings that make this place so special. But the challenges that wildlife face aren't so different from those at that little rescue on the east coast of Florida where I first started. Last Friday, we released a baby owl back to the wild after they needed stitches from entanglement in a barbed wire fence. Tonight, I'm driving 5 hours to the Steens to release 2 baby badgers that were orphaned after their mom was hit by a car. And we receive over 250 calls a year about mule deer that have been hit by cars. 95% of the eagles that we've accepted for care have tested positive for lead poisoning. Ultimately, wildlife centers like Think Wild and East Coast Wildlife Rehab exist because there is a need. Native wildlife and their habitat everywhere are experiencing pressures related to human development and urbanization, especially in places like Bend. When I think back on why I felt such a connection to this field, and I listen to our volunteers, donors, and supporters, there's a common theme. It's responsibility. As humans, we have a responsibility to help these living beings that are directly negatively impacted by our actions, that have a right to live in and exist in their home as much as we do. As members of the Central Oregon community, we have a responsibility to share and protect this unique place with and for wildlife, and to educate newcomers on how to do that too. And we have a responsibility to stop for the squirrel on the side of the road. You just might find that it'll have a bigger impact than you think. So now I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Think Wild, but I wanted to start out by asking if you've ever found an injured or orphan animal. So who here has found an injured or orphan animal? What kinds of animals have you found? Birds, window strikes, right? Probably window strikes, owls, yep. I'm sure almost everybody here has probably seen an injured deer on the side of the road. Yeah, it's a pretty frequent occurrence. What did you do when you found an injured or orphan wildlife? Oh, that's great. Yeah, so fortunately, we have a wildlife hotline now that people can call, but a couple years ago, there was a gap where there were really there was no central public wildlife hospital. There were a few private rehabbers, but generally, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife doesn't provide rescue rehab, and so if there aren't rehab centers, there's really nothing that can be done in almost every case. So what is Think Wild? Like I said, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We cover central and parts of eastern Oregon, so you can see prior to Think Wild, these were other public wildlife hospitals. Maybe you've heard of like Portland Audubon or Shintimony. So we're covering a really big region, and in many cases, we're limited to this region by like within our watershed for the animals that we care for. We've got about 16 staff that do everything from animal care to education programs, wildlife habitat restoration. We have a humane wildlife services program, and we're located over on the corner of Erickson and Neff, so if you ever drive by, you can stop by and say hi. So Central Oregon faces a major issue, and that issue is urban expansion. So I think for a couple years now, we've been one of the top 10 growing cities in North America. I don't know if that's slowing down. The COVID shutdowns obviously exacerbated that issue. But urban expansion comes with a lot of challenges for wildlife, including fencing, which is something that obviously we think of barbed wire fencing, but even just like this tall, impassable fencing can cause a lot of issues for migrating wildlife. We've got a lot of road development, construction that's causing habitat fragmentation, car traffic. And of course, wildfires have become an increasing issue as well. So we see a lot of the direct impacts that humans have on wildlife. I think about 70% of the patients that we receive, their injuries or orphaning are directly caused by human and wildlife interactions. So, for example, this was a juvenile osprey that its mother made the nest with some hay bale twine, and unfortunately, when he tried to fledge the nest, he had developed with the twine around his ankles. And so, fortunately, we were able to rehabilitate and release them, but in many cases, those animals are never found. You can see this is an X-ray of I think that was a turkey vulture that had a lead bullet. barbed wire fencing entanglements, and a lot of baby birds that are displaced due to just tree trimming, construction, development. So like I said in my speech, our mission is to inspire you all to care for and protect native wildlife through education, conservation, and rescue and rehab. Our vision is that one day we would never accept any wildlife to our hospital because we would all live in harmony and peace, and no wildlife would get injured. So this kind of just gives you a little bit of a demonstration. So like I said, we have a full-time or part-time veterinarian that cares for our animals. We do a lot of different habitat plantings, mostly focused on riparian and beaver habitat plantings. And then we have a bunch of summer camps happening this summer as well. So we have a hotline, and if anybody has your phones on you, you can put this number in your phone. It's really helpful to have. You can also Google it pretty easily, but if you're ever out on a hike and you encounter wildlife, it's a good resource to have. We operate this hotline every single day. In the summer, it's from 9 to 4 p.m. And most of the calls we get are about mule deer, but quite a few calls that are just general wildlife questions, people that have concerns. And what's pretty neat is that about 60% of the phone calls that we get are resolved through education. So that means that more than half of the calls don't actually end up in an animal being brought to our care. We can usually educate the caller on how we could just help the animal right there in the field, which often includes renestings, reunitings, fosterings. The hospital is sort of like a last resort option. And then we've got the hospital. So like I said, this is a full capacity operating wildlife hospital. We have digital radiography. We can do lab testing. We have a lot of different research partnerships with OSU. We have a veterinary technician rotation program with the Central Oregon Community College so people can get wildlife veterinary experience. And that's a little pic of the badger that we'll be releasing tonight. So we've got 2 of them, and those were our first badger patients ever, which was pretty exciting. And like I said, we do a lot of wildlife research. So we have a Golden Eagle post-release monitoring program that we do with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We test every raptor patient that comes in for lead poisoning, so we can collect data on that. And we have a few different collaborations with some OSU professors looking at like parasite concentration, the Deschutes River, wildlife morphology, things like that. And then our newest program is Humane Wildlife Services, because about 20% of the calls to our hotline were people wanting to get rid of those raccoons and skunks from under their decks. And so we figured that if we could offer services to provide humane long-term solutions, that could be a lot better than, calling a pest control company to come out and exterminate a mother raccoon where her babies end up in an enclosure at Think Wild. So we've been operating this for about a year. It's nice because it's kind of like a revenue generating program. We can also do wildlife habitat improvements. So if you guys want nest boxes or consultations on how to improve your property for wildlife, we can do that too. And it's kind of a cool partnership because we have a lot of local schools that build the nest boxes for us, and then we can go out and install them. And then BeaverWorks Oregon is our wildlife habitat restoration program. We basically go out to both public and private lands. We plant beaver habitat, and the hope is that we can kind of promote natural beaver recovery as they're really important keystone species. And if you've ever seen a beaver wetland, you can find all sorts of different reptiles, amphibians, and birds that live there too. And so this is a really quickly growing program that we have. If you like to get outside, plant trees, and camp, then you should definitely check this out. And then we also have our youth education and outreach programs. So we do on-site tours, we do summer camps, we provide free after-school programming to all of the Jefferson County schools. And then we also just got a new ambassador hawk 2 weeks ago. So she'll be a representative for red-tailed hawks that have been injured or orphaned, and just help kind of facilitate that messaging. So how can you help? This is the important part. Volunteering, we're always looking for volunteers, like what Heather does in the hospital. It's a pretty unique experience to get hands-on care with the wildlife that lives in Central Oregon. You can always use education volunteers, rescue transport, habitat restoration, and just going out and telling your friends about the work that we do is a way of volunteering. Helping us fundraise, so we have a lot of different fun ways to raise money. We actually do not get any government funding whatsoever, even though we answer all their phone calls, so that's fun. But yeah, we offer enclosure naming, private wildlife releases. We collect cans for the bottle drop, and supply donations are always helpful too. And then, of course, using our services. So if you ever find injured or orphaned wildlife, call our hotline. That's what we're here for. And then also, if you're just like, I want to go on a hike and I want to see this species, we can usually give you recommendations, whether that's for like bird watching, or if you want a bigger chance of maybe seeing a badger or something like that, we can kind of provide safe recommendations. Using our humane exclusion service, so don't, anything you can do to not exterminate animals or cause orphaning is a really good thing. And then also, schedule an education program or tour. We do a lot of different activities outside of just the hospital. So thank you for your support. And after this session, I'll just be over at the table in the gathering hall if you have any other questions or want to talk about anything native wildlife. Thank you.
Well, Heather has worked her magic on another song, and the words are slightly different, as you might notice, and we're going to be singing "We've Got the Whole World in Our Hands." And so if you would rise in body or spirit, we're going to sing this together. And by the way, thank you so much for that wonderful message. That was fantastic. Thank you once again. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the whole wide world in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the rivers and the mountains in our hands. We've got the rivers and the mountains in our hands. We've got the rivers and the mountains in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the trees and the flowers in our hands. We've got the trees and the flowers in our hands. We've got the trees and the flowers in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the squirrels and the otters in our hands. We got the badgers and the beavers in our hands. We've got the eagles in our hands. We got the whole world in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the whole wide world in our hands. We got the whole world in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. You may remain standing.
If you will join me in saying the covenant, there it is, while Sally extinguishes our chalice. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Just got some closing words that are an opening passage from Wilding by Isabella Tree. We forget, in a world completely transformed by man, that what we're looking at is not necessarily the environment that wildlife prefer, but the depleted remnant that wildlife is having to cope with. What it has is not necessarily what it wants.
Thank you all very much. And like she said, she'll be out at her table so that you can talk to Sally about the amazing things she has accomplished. Thank you.